product messaging should always reside inside of marketing. Where the integration points come in is how do we take what the product features and functions do, and we translate that into solving real world business problems.
Hey there, I'm Bernie Borges, Chief Customer Officer at Vengreso, the leader in digital sales transformation. I'm also the host of this show, the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. On this podcast, I showcase B2B marketers in the trenches, showcasing strategies and tactics that are working for them in their modern marketing journey. Be sure to listen to the end of each conversation for my summary and takeaway, as well as the closing message. And now, here's this week's Modern Marketer. Hey there, welcome to episode 288. My guest this week, the Modern Marketer guest this week, is none other than my co-founder and CEO at Vengreso, Mario Martinez Jr. Mario, welcome back to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Bernie Borges, I'm excited to be here with you. There we go.
Awesome. Well, we're together pretty much almost every day anyway, but we were together on this podcast way back on episode 204. And we talked about at that time content for sales enablement. So I wanted to bring you back and talk about something that I think is really relevant to what we're seeing as we're exiting 2020 and coming into this, new year when things have changed so much in 2020. Before we dive into that, though, I want to give my listener, I always ask my listener to give an introduction to their company. And in this case, it's our company. And since I don't really talk a lot about our company on the podcast, I'd like you to just give my listener a brief introduction to Vengreso. Who's Vengreso?
So Vengreso, great question. We are a modern sales training company. We actually help sales leaders and sales teams to create more sales conversations with their target buyers through digital selling skills and technologies. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those technologies actually later on today. It's, in fact, very excited to talk about that. So our main focus is really making sure that we teach the sales rep and the sales teams how to leverage digital, right? So we're looking at video, social, text, and other messaging platforms to be able to engage digitally with their buyer and create more sales conversations. At the end of the day, that's all we care about is more sales conversations.
Yep. And of course, at Vengreso, we have two podcasts. I mentioned that in my outro in my podcast. It's a pre-recorded outro, so I'm not really talking about it often. And of course, this podcast, the Modern Marketing Engine podcast, is for, of course, the modern marketer. And that's one of the personas that we talk to when we're reaching out and talking to organizations about these modern selling strategies. But of course, the other persona that we reach is the modern seller. And Mario, you are the host of the Modern Selling podcast. So give my listener an introduction to your podcast.
Yeah, so thank you. We're about 162 episodes deep now. We're going on our fourth year, if I'm not mistaken. I think this is coming up on our fourth year. But nonetheless, it's a sales podcast, as you mentioned, the Modern Selling podcast. Targeted towards the sales leader and sales rep and business owners and individuals. But anybody who's trying to look at modern selling techniques and messaging and planning to be able to help reach today's modern buyer. And of course, we get into post-hello. So from the hello to the close side and strategies around there as well. So I encourage all of your listeners to listen into the Modern Selling podcast as well, in addition to the amazing Modern Marketing Engine.
And of course, both of our podcasts are accessible not only where you can listen to any podcast on any device, but also on our website at vengreso.com. I do want to mention for my listener, if you don't mind, Mario, you are in between microphones right now. So I just want to point that out. As a podcaster, I know that you're normally on another microphone, and we didn't want to delay the recording of this podcast. So even though you're in between microphones, we are here because as the old saying goes, I think in a place called Hollywood or even New York, the show must go on. And we have a message we want to get across today. And ironically, no pun intended, the message that we want to deliver today is about messaging, but specifically, it's about sales messaging. And the first thing that I want to comment on before we get into conversation is why are we talking about sales messaging on the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. Why is this important for marketers to even be thinking about, Mario?
Well, I think if you simply stated, marketers should be thinking about this because we, as marketers, should be supporting our sales teams in all of the right messaging, the go-to-market messaging, the messaging and how which we engage with our buyers, even all of our messaging related to social media and digital engagement. Oftentimes, a marketing organization is responsible for building out even sales playbooks, things that they might be saying in sales cadences and those types of things, in addition to the standard stuff that we're building, like case studies, content, ebooks, white papers, all those types of things. So in my mind, this is not a sales messaging or a marketing messaging. This is messaging to reach our buyer, and all players and all parties need to be involved in this.
Yep. Totally agree. Totally agree. Again, as we're exiting 2020 and coming into this new year, the integration of marketing and sales, I think, has never, ever been more deeply intertwined than just ever before. And I've talked about it before, and I just want to let my listener know I'm going to be talking more about it because it's really big. It's really a key topic, and I think it warrants more conversation. So stay tuned for that. So let's get into it. Let's talk about what is sales messaging. What are the kinds of things that need to be in a sales messaging strategy?
So that's a great question, and one of the biggest things that we need to be thinking about around sales messaging is really pushing our sellers at how to leverage personalization and hyper personalization. So a lot of folks, because of the remote selling capabilities now of our sales team, we've utilized sales prospecting tools and sales cadence tools, sales automation tools, all these tools to really start driving out more emails, more connections, more whatever it might be that our sellers are doing. And I think what we've lost sight of, Bernie, is that a sales messaging strategy needs to have a focus on hyper personalization. In addition to that, we need to be focused in on how do we help the seller bring value to the conversation. That is super, uber critical when we think about the value that we're bringing. And so what do we mean by bringing value? Because it's very cliche, I think, what most people talk about this. Well, I'll tell you how we perceive it from a Vengreso standpoint, and I'm sure all the marketers would agree, but when our salespeople are reaching out to a prospective buyer, whether it's an inbound lead or it's an outbound lead, at the end of the day, we know we're reaching out to a target buyer persona, and that buyer persona has an individual pain that our product or service can solve. So when we think about value, we've got to bring content, whether that's webinars, ebooks, videos, whatever it might be, infographics. What's the value that we're bringing to help solve the particular problem that this buyer might have related to the product or services that we sell? And that's the valuable content and valuable information. So personalization, value, and then one of the biggest challenges that I think our sellers have today is understanding what is the proper call to action that they should include inside of a message. Should it be, I want to book a 15-minute meeting with you? Should it be a question that it solicits engagement? Could it be an invitation to attend something specifically? There are many different options, and a lot of our sellers are going straight for the jugular. I want a meeting. Give me 15 minutes. Or the latest one that I saw, all I need is 7 minutes of your time. So please don't do that. If your message just says 7 minutes, don't do that. But that having been said, we call that personalization, the value, and the CTA. That's called our PVC sales methodology. And this sales methodology is really structured around what every sales messaging strategy needs. Whatever you're putting out, whether it's for a cold call, whether it's for an email, whether it's for a LinkedIn message, whether it's for a LinkedIn connection request message, think PVC, personalization, value, and call to action.
Okay. So how does that actually get, let's break that down a little bit more. So I agree with all of that. And I think from the standpoint of the modern marketer really contributing to a salesperson's sales messaging strategy and effectiveness, they need to be thinking about personalization, how they can add value, and the types of calls to actions that are relevant. And I think call to action is something that all marketers are very familiar with. So let's just unpack that a little bit more. So what's that framework look like in terms of the implementation of this PVC approach?
So a couple different ways you can use this. You can use this on the inbound. You can use this on the outbound, right? You can use this in email. You can use this on LinkedIn messaging. You can use this on connection requests. You can use it when on the phone as well. So there's many different use cases that you can utilize the PVC sales methodology. But the most important thing that we think about is that our email should be structured, or our messaging, our sales messaging should be structured around this methodology using PVC so that it is attracting, not detracting
Right.
or distracting our buyer. And that's where we got to be thinking about this. And if you think about this one aspect, Bernie, never before in modern selling history or sales history and buyer purchasing has something crossed over each other like the way it is now. Let me explain. Never before, where the buyer is digitally connected, socially engaged, mobile attached, and video hungry. Now, parlay that into the selling motion, which the seller is also digitally connected, socially engaged, mobile attached, and video producers.
Hopefully,
Right?
hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. Never before in buying and selling history have those two worlds ever been perfectly aligned. And that's where we're at today as a result of remote selling, as a result of virtual selling, because we can't meet our customers face to face for obvious reasons of a global pandemic. And even when there is a cure found and that is now spread across the globe, it will not swing back to the way it was from a field-based outbound sales methodology. Our sellers will truly be mostly remote, in my opinion. At least 60% of our sales organizations will be predominantly doing remote and virtual selling. So thinking about this messaging, we have to understand that, because every touch point that we touch a buyer in, whether it's social, video, email, phone, whatever it might be, we have to be thinking about how do I teach my sellers to personalize? How do I teach my sellers to bring value through content? And how do I drive the right call to action to be able to continue moving the conversation from the next step to the next step to the next?
And Mario, McKinsey agrees with you because they have some data out there that shows that 80% of B2B buyers actually like the remote selling and buying environment. And they don't want to go back to the way it used to be. They have no interest in lunches and in-person meetings. They're perfectly happy with the way it is. So they agree, and I also agree as well. So, okay. So PVC, lots of different use cases. What about sales ready messaging versus marketing messaging? And I think this is a key topic for marketers, right? Because they're very accustomed, very adept, very experienced at producing marketing messaging. How is that different from sales ready messaging?
So good question. So some of the differences between sales ready messaging and marketing message. If you think about, marketing message or market, well, let me start out with saying this. Marketing generally markets one to many. And then someone comes into the funnel, and then they've got basically a drip campaign that they're doing. And that drip campaign is trying to lead them down from the path of lead to MQL, from MQL to handing over as an SQL to the sales organization. Sellers, however, interestingly enough, are doing the exact same thing, but they're only marketing one to one at a time, essentially. And so if you think about the different types of messages that are out, the different type, the way that we message, a seller has got to be able to really deliver on that hyper personalization that marketing generally can't get to as a result of having the one to many strategy. So hyper personalization is super important when you look at the differences between sales ready messages versus marketing based messaging. In addition to that, oftentimes marketing messaging is really focused on buyer persona, right? Because they aren't doing that hyper personalization. So they're really targeting that buyer persona, and they're trying to hit to those pains. Now, it doesn't mean that sales ready messaging can't do the same thing. In fact, in our PVC sales methodology, we talk about that if you don't have anything to personalize to the individual, then your next level down is personalized to the buyer persona. But that's the difference between sales ready messaging and marketing messaging, is that marketing will rarely ever be able to market to the individual themselves. They will generally default to the buyer persona. Whereas sales ready messaging, we're really focusing on teaching sellers the skill at which how to engage with their buyers on a hyper personalization level.
So, learning something about your prospective buyer and delivering some hyper personalization that reflects the fact that you know something about them, their situation, their circumstances, their needs, their interests, their background, etc., in a professional way, not in a stalking kind of a way, but in a very professional and again hyper personalized way. And then, if that's not possible, then what I hear you saying is personalized to the role, right? The CMO, the CFO, the CEO, that kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. And I'll expand on this and one more level down to give a real life example. Some of the marketers might be saying, well, gosh, that doesn't sound like anything different. So let me explain. As an example, when our sellers are reaching out, Vengreso sellers, that is, are reaching out to prospective marketers or prospective sales leaders or sales enablement leaders, which are the three buyer personas that we generally play with on any one of our deals. Um, a message that comes from a seller would be an example through a video. They're going to specifically have, and those of you that are listening to the audio, you can't see that I'm holding up a whiteboard. They're going to have a whiteboard and they're going to specifically write down, hey, Bernie, I'm interested in having a conversation with you. And they're literally writing this down and they're personalizing the individual. We're not talking about tools like Vidyard, where Vidyard can take a whiteboard and lop on someone's hi Bernie, and that basically it says first name. We're talking about personalization down to the individual writing. And then when that video comes out, the seller says something like, Bernie, thanks so much for engaging with or thanks so much for downloading, or I wanted to reach out to you and congratulate you on, I saw that you posted, whatever it might be. So it's hyper personalized to that individual. And that's that sales ready messaging that also has the V and the C, which is the value and the call to actions inside there. That makes a real big difference between sales ready versus marketing.
Now, Mario, a lot of marketers cringe when they think about having salespeople write anything, and that is not an insult. It's just the idea of they want sellers selling, not writing. So, who's responsible for writing all this sales ready messaging? The sellers or the marketers?
So that's a really good question, and I'll answer that with I agree. Even as the CEO of Vengreso, Bernie, I just talked to you about this last night. It took me, I clocked 18 hours to write 3 different blog articles, right? And now these were beefy blog articles, 3,500 words each. Now, if you hand that over to our content marketer, it took him 4 hours, right? So I, as a homegrown native seller, I'm not a writer. And generally speaking, we don't want our salespeople to be responsible for writing that message. So the shoulders that it falls on, in my opinion, starts with the sales enablement team. And if you don't have a sales enablement team, then definitely the marketing team. But the marketing team must be in tune with what's actually going on in the field before they start engaging on writing it. And as an example, Bernie, you're now our chief customer officer, but when you sat in the CMO role here at Vengreso, every week you were listening to 1 or 2 customer calls. And from those calls, you were taking notes and saying the marketing organization needs to develop this or that, or we need to structure our messaging around this or that, because we hear the same problem over and over again, and we need to help our sellers with that messaging. And so marketing, if you're responsible for this, we can't just grab our quote email copywriter and say, hey, write some sales ready messaging. Mm-hmm. No, that's not the way we do things. The way we do this is we grab one of our content marketers, our field marketer, and we put them in the field, help them understand a sales process. For example, our marketing organization, when they come on board, they actually watch a full-on sales program where it's from the first conversation to the closing conversation that wins a deal. They're spending those 7 hours of watching those calls to understand what the field is going through so that they can create this sales ready messaging that helps the seller sell more and attract their buyer.
Okay, thank you for that. So, what about sales messaging versus product messaging? Because obviously, at some point, we do need to be talking about product. That's the solution that we're selling, whatever solution you sell. How does that work its way into the PVC methodology?
So that's a really good question. Product messaging should always reside inside of marketing. Where the integration points come in is how do we take what the product features and functions do, and we translate that into solving real world business problems. So product messaging, always owned by marketing. Sales ready messaging includes taking those features and functions and translating them into real world business value, real world um, messaging that's solving real world problems. That's what I'm trying to say. And oftentimes, our sellers are trained on the quote product, and then they're expected to go out and start finding customers or prospecting to customers to bring in that customer for that particular product. But what we haven't done is help them understand the business problem that we solve. Let me illustrate it this way. If you were to line up any marketer listening in, if you were to say, pretend you have 100 sales reps, take 100 of your sales reps, line them up, and ask them in one sentence, can you describe what business problem we solve for our customers? I'm going to take a wild guess that any marketer who's listening to that question right now is going to say, at least 8 out of 10 will not be able to answer that question. Because we, as a marketing organization, have not done a good enough job in articulating in one sentence the business problem that we solve. Let me illustrate it with this example, Bernie. Let's pretend you, Bernie, are a VP of sales that we're speaking to. If I were to send you a message, my message might look something like this. Pretending I'm not hyper personalizing to you because you're not socially active, you don't have anything going on out there. I'm going to personalize now to the buyer persona.
My role, okay.
Say, hey, Bernie, Mario here. Generally, when I speak to other VPs of sales or VPs of sales, they have two common problems. Number one, they want to increase the number of sales conversations that their sellers are having. And number two, they want to increase the sales pipeline. Is that a problem that you're faced with?
Yes.
Now, of course, right? So, sorry. So thinking of that, as soon as as a recipient, as a buyer, Bernie, as soon as you received a message like that, assuming no personalization to you as an individual, if you read that, you're going to do one of two things when looking at those questions. You're either going to say what or what?
Yes or no.
Yes or no. And if you say no, you stop reading and therefore you don't respond. But if you say yes, what would generally happen?
Then I'm potentially willing to engage in conversation.
Or at least you're going to keep reading, right?
Yeah.
You're going to keep reading on with that message. And that's where comes in the next portion of that message is not a product pitch, not a I've got this that has all these features and all these bells and whistles and all of these things that can help solve blah, blah, blah. No. What we speak to now is the value. Directly below, Bernie, are two items. So if you have that problem or either of those two problems, what would you do, Bernie? You're either going to do one of two things.
I'm going to say yes or no.
Exactly. And if you said no, you stop reading and you don't respond. But if you said yes, generally, you're going to
keep reading.
Exactly right. Continue reading. Now, what you do next in terms of having a sales message versus product message is you don't say, and by the way, I've got the greatest training in all the world, and it has this element and this feature, and it's 15 weeks, and the video is 8 weeks, and then what we can do it. No. That's diarrhea. That's product, right? What we're doing is we create a sales message, and in that sales message, it says, here are two things that can help you out, Bernie. Number one is a webinar. I encourage you to watch this webinar with your team on your next 1 hour call. It will take you through two things that your sellers can do right now to create more sales conversations on LinkedIn. The second item, Bernie, is a blog article. And that blog article talks about 5 things that you can do to be able to improve your videos that you might be sending.
So you're delivering value. In both cases, you're delivering value. Okay.
Exactly. Now, I didn't talk about product at all, right? We're bringing the value in. And that's the difference between product and sales messaging. Once you get into a conversation, now that's where the value of product messaging comes through, where you're explaining the deeper dive of the product and translating those product features and functions into business benefits.
Okay, so where I want to go next, now that we've been kind of going down this funnel in the conversation, Mario, we started with, why it's important to have sales messaging, the difference between sales messaging and marketing messaging, and then how do you differentiate that from product messaging? So in the end, there's a lot of messaging that needs to be written and stored and deployed to a sales team. So how does that happen? How do you actually deploy all this sales messaging to a sales team in a way that's really efficient and effective?
So a couple things. First off, we have the entire PVC sales method. In fact, if you go to pvcsalesmethod.com, it will actually break this all down for you. But now, as you start developing all these messages for your sellers, what do you do with them? Generally, most marketing or sales enablement organizations will put them on a Microsoft Word document, throw it out to the intranet, put a link into the chat or to the Slack channel or an email into the sellers, and says, here, guys, we've developed the brand new messaging for you. And what do you think sellers are going to do with that, Bernie? Open it or not?
Not a whole lot. It's going to be a 42-page document, and not a lot's going to get done with it.
Exactly right. And then our marketers are very frustrated because they're like, man, I did all this work.
That's right.
And nobody's going to use it. Or you see something that comes through from a salesperson, you're like, oh my God, why did they? I wrote the messaging for them, right? So I'm excited. And one of the reasons why I'm on the show is because we've just released a brand new sales productivity and messaging tool to the marketplace. It's called Fly Message. So flymsg.io. So just http://flymessage.io. And what Fly Message allows you to do, it allows you to categorize and title your messages and create shortcuts, or what we call fly cuts, short abbreviations, so that if you wanted to just type in with a few keystrokes a phrase, then the whole entire message pops up. Example, we have our entire PVC sales method template inside of Fly Message for free for all users to download. And with that, all you have to do is type the code -cold template, and boom, the entire PVC sales method template pops up, and now you just fill in the blanks. Now that's one use case, whereas other marketing organizations may be fully writing that content out for a prospective buyer persona. You can now pass that off to your seller. They can put it into their Fly Message, and what will soon be coming out for the corporate enterprise is we'll give the corporate enterprise administration access so that they can put in these Fly Messages into the platform and then push them out to the sellers. That drives consistency in the message, usage and adoption of the message. And it's really, really, really exciting what we've launched here.
So Mario, just a little bit of context here, and let's keep it brief because we're short on time. The background on this is, we deliver training, and in our training, we have been using a different tool, third-party tool, that would enable sellers to actually create these shortcuts, right? But that tool had a lot of problems. And that inspired us to build our own tool so that we can deliver it to not just the folks that go through our training program, Mario, but really to the world, the whole sales community at large. So I just wanted to comment on that. And I want to come back to the tool flymessage.io. You mentioned that there's an enterprise version, but what about for the individual? How much does it cost for the individual?
Well, for the enterprise and for the individual, there is a free plan. And we've got 22 of our fly plates, we call them, our templates, that are already pre-programmed. So free of charge, you can go ahead and use it. We are going to be building out the premium paid version and the corporate version as well. And that's forthcoming in the coming months here that will be released to the marketplace. But overall, we used to use a tool called Auto Text Expander. We put in a short code, and then boom, it would put all of our sales messages and not write them out nicely. But what it was missing was rich text formats, the ability to add images, the ability to add videos, the ability to bring in those URLs, the ability to be able to hyperlink, to make bold, to have sections. So we really
and the ability to create categories so that you can organize all your fly cuts in different categories. I've created a category for admin and operations and routine things like address, my Zoom link, my signature, things that are just routine, right? So creating categories is just a huge benefit of using FlyMessage, which was not available in Auto Text Expander.
Oh my God. I didn't think of using address. I got to do that one. I got to build a fly cut for having our corporate address, because I'm asked all the time, what's your corporate address? I didn't think of that one, but yes, that's exactly right. Customer success can use this. Marketers can use this. In fact, on the marketing side, here's a little tip for you. We get inbound requests all the time for guest blogging. And so we actually have a pre-canned message, and we were storing that and saving that on Google Notes and trying to share it across multiple people. All we did was build a fly cut. We took that message, and now every time someone asks to be a guest blogger, we literally reply -guest blogger. Boom, it builds out the whole message, and we changed the word from hey first name to hey Bob, hey Susie, hey Mary, and we hit send, and away we go. So tremendous upside in terms of sales productivity, and tremendous upside in terms of, from a marketing standpoint, to really push out messaging that will drive consistency in the way sellers use it and actually help them perform better. So we like to think of it as less typing, more selling.
Less typing, more selling. Fantastic. Well, one last thing, and I'm going to forego my usual summary because we're short on time. We're over on time. So I'm going to forego my summary. And I just want to mention that what we've been discussing here about FlyMessage is that it is a Chrome extension. It's not an app. It's not something you have to purchase. It's a Chrome extension. So Mario, where I want to really just wrap is tell everyone once again, where can they go get FlyMessage, and then how can they connect with you online and just stay connected to all of your content as well?
So http://flymsg.io. Also, you can just go to Vengreso.com, and right at the top of the navigation bar is FlyMessage. And certainly, if you go to Chrome, you can just search for FlyMSG. FlyMSG will allow you to find it. And if you want to connect with me, I would love to connect with more marketers. That's my secret passion. Bernie knows that I'm really into the whole marketing thing, and now
you're a marketing geek.
I can't go to bed at nighttime. I'm reading all about marketing ideas. But so please connect with me on LinkedIn and make sure you say you heard me on the Modern Marketing Engine with Mr. Bernie Borges.
Fantastic. Well, Mario, I promise not to wait 80 episodes before we bring you back on some other compelling topics. So thank you for joining me on this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Thanks, Bernie.
Hey, that's a wrap for this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. Hey, if you're not subscribed, I invite you to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast player so that you don't miss a single episode. And I'd love it if you give the Modern Marketing Engine podcast a rating or review in Apple Podcasts. That really helps others to discover it. We publish a show notes page for each episode with links to the resources that were mentioned during the conversation. Just go to Vengreso.com and navigate to the podcast menu. And while you're there, be sure to check out our Modern Selling podcast hosted by Vengreso's CEO, Mario Martinez Jr. Hey, are you following the Modern Marketing Engine podcast on the socials? We're active on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube. In fact, we publish each episode on YouTube for those who listen to audio content on YouTube. Hey, one last thing. If you and I are not connected on LinkedIn, I invite you to send me a personal invitation to connect. Now, please be sure to say that you're a listener of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. If you don't include a personal note, I have no way of knowing that that's how you found me. Hey, until next time, I wish you continued success on your modern marketing journey.